And with that, let's now shift focus over to the United States. CNN has now conducted a poll, and here's what it deduces: that abortion's role as an electoral litmus test has not faded, that too a year after its Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade in the United States. A 64% majority of US adults say they disapprove of last year's Supreme Court ruling that women do not have a constitutional right to an abortion, with half of them strongly disapproving. Here are some more deductions. That, let us also tell you, is an assessment that's almost entirely unchanged from the poll that CNN conducted in July last year, that was in the immediate wake of the decision. Now, the new poll suggests that the issue's importance as an electoral litmus test has not diminished. In May 2022, immediately after the leaked draft of the Dobbs decision, 26% of Americans said they would only vote for a candidate who shared their views on abortion. In the latest poll, too, that number now stands at 29%. Another 55% say they'd consider a candidate's position on abortion as one of the many important factors, for a combined total of 84% who say they are likely to pay attention to candidates' position on abortion while voting. Just 16% say they do not see abortion as a major issue, and that, interestingly, is a record low in CNN polling dating back to the year 1996. Now, equally important to keep in mind is that on Tuesday, abortion rights advocate won a critical victory in Ohio. It beat back a measure that would have made their push for abortion rights in the state's constitution even more difficult. Let's now try and make sense of not just the Ohio win, but also the numbers of this poll and for what it will mean for the upcoming races. Let me also introduce my guests. I'm joined in by Corinne Clark, who's the co-founder of freepressfall.com, Nicole Brenner-Schmitz, who's a Democrat strategist and is also been a part of one of the pro-choice nonprofits called NARAL. Thank you so much for joining in, ladies. Nicole, if I may begin with you, most of those who oppose the ruling, a 78% majority, say that politicians in the federal government who support legalizing abortion are not doing enough to ensure abortion access. Even 60% have said that politicians in their state governments are similarly doing too little. What do you make of this observation from a Democrat perspective?
Yeah, look, I mean, Democrats are mad about this. This is real. Women are not going to stand for their rights being taken away. This isn't Target. This isn't Bud Light. No one's going to forget about it and let it go away. The Supreme Court decision has real life ramifications, and we've seen that it is effective for motivating these voters. I mean, you have to remember that in 2016, pro-choice organizations ran campaigns begging presidential candidates to talk about this issue at all in their debates. We did not see Democrats talking about it. And now they've realized that in light of this decision and the rights being pulled away from the women of this country, this is something they can run on. These are not 50-50 issues anymore. And this is not something that barely passed. These are red states, Kansas, Ohio. And people are stepping up and saying, no, you can't take away these rights. And they're dominating by over 60% on these issues. So this is something the Democrats are going to continue to talk about and focus on and remind the voters where individual politicians stand on the issue. And they want to see the elected officials that they have step up and do as much as they can to protect as many rights for women as they possibly can.
Bring you in on this. A 62% majority of women, younger, mind you, than the age of 45, have said that they strongly disapprove of the Dobbs decision, and 34% say that overturning Roe has negatively affected them and their family. Both, of course, what is to be noted, are higher than the figures among older women or men of any age. Do you think age or the generation factor is playing a more crucial role than perhaps making it a partisan issue?
I certainly think age happens to be a factor here because younger millennials like myself, we have been inundated by social media campaigns who continuously express to us that this is the issue of our time. And that doesn't always translate at the polls. In fact, it rarely does. the most reliable abortion voters are anti-abortion voters, and they are more likely to be single issue voters who are not distracted by anything else going on, including our horrific economy and our terrible weaponization of the Department of Justice, which will drive people to the polls a lot more than abortion. What I think is interesting here is that the abortion issue is much bigger on the state level now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And the way that Democrats talk about this, you would think that the state legislatures across the country are not also elected. They absolutely are. And often they are elected to make this pro-life abortion legislation. We've seen pro-life legislation pass in, I think, over 20 states now. And all of those members of those legislatures, individual states, they were elected by the people. So I don't think this outrage is a true reflection of the electorate. And we're seeing that on the state level already. And because Roe v. Wade was overturned, it is less of a federal issue in the upcoming election.
All right, Nicole, how do you assess the victory of abortion rights activists in Ohio?
I mean, look, this was made clear. The Republicans said out loud what they were doing. They said the words, we're going to try and sneak this up on them. We're going to try and do it in August, in the summer when they're not paying attention. They wanted to ram this through when they thought people were out on summer break and not paying attention and not realizing what was at stake. And people stepped up and said, absolutely not. And if you look at it in the state, even like certain counties that ended up voting in support of the pro-choice perspective. I mean, these are counties that have voted for Republicans in the past. This is going to be an issue that voters care about. Is it one of many? Yes. Is it the absolute litmus for every single person? No. But it is going to be a factor, and it's going to matter not just on the federal stage, but for the state legislatures too. That's absolutely right. They're elected, and we saw a historic year in the midterms. First time since 1935 that the majority party, the party that held the White House, has not lost a chamber and actually gained chambers. Why? Michigan has an ancient, archaic law on its books about abortion that would have criminalized it. That was motivating for people. The Michigan legislatures, Senate and House, flipped for the first time since the 80s. And we're seeing this have its impact at the federal and at the state levels.
All right. Corinne, what will this victory now mean for Ohio's 2024 Senate race?
I think it'll mean less to the Senate race than it will to the local races in Ohio, as I mentioned, because Roe v. Wade made it clear that abortion is no longer a federal issue. So our senators and our House of Reps and even our president have less power over that issue than they have had in the last 50 years. I think that is both a victory for both pro-life and pro-choice activists, because they have way more power at the state level to increase abortion rights where they want to. And we'll see safe havens throughout the country, and California and New York and Colorado, and they continue to have the most progressive abortion legislation in the nation. But states like Texas and Arkansas and Idaho, and we will see pro-life legislation continue to succeed there, because that's what the voters want, and that is exactly how it should be.
Nicole, if we were to delve deeper into Ohio's result, don't you think that the outcome demonstrates, despite the state's rightward drift, Republicans' opposition to abortion rights continues to hamstring their own party?
I mean, look, they've got a base of about 30 some odd percent that are very strict on this and are in fact anti-choice, and that's what you see turn up in elections like this. And you know, when Roe v. Wade was the law of the land, they were able to motivate that base on this without really rankling the anger from the left side, because they felt a place of protection with Roe v. Wade in place. But that's not the case any longer. So certainly the Democratic Party and people have realized they can't take this for granted. It's not a federal protection anymore. So they need to be diligent and focused on it state by state. But we also need to make sure that we continue to have federal electeds that will stand up and protect a woman's right to choose. So it is going to be a factor for Senator Sherrod Brown's reelection. And the great news about that is that, Ohio has this amazing senator in Sherrod Brown. He stands up for working people. He's an amazing person for the worker in Ohio, for bringing industry to Ohio, for bringing manufacturing back to Ohio. And he's going to stand up for women's rights and make sure that rights aren't taken away from Americans.
Corinne, let me close in with your thoughts. Could this shift the focus of elections in key states onto politically problematic ground for the Grand Old Party, what we've seen happen in Ohio?
I don't think we saw that happen in Ohio in 2022 election. That was past Roe v. Wade's overturning, and a Republican senator won in 2022. I think that what we will see that I think is very problematic is Democrat senators are going to pretend that women are too stupid to know that a senator right now a U.S. senator in the federal government cannot promise to protect your abortion rights. They do not have that constitutional authority. That's what was determined by the Supreme Court's ruling. And they will continue to think that we are dumb enough to believe when they say, I will protect your abortion rights or I will stand to defend life, that they will do that. They have no constitutional authority to do it. It is not a federal issue. And I would hope that they stop treating women as idiots and start respecting that we understand the separation of powers, and that is a state legislature's issue.
All right, I think we leave it at that. Many thanks to you, Corinne Clark and Nicole.
Law. The Republican Congress is introducing a national ban. Democratic senators can vote against a national ban.
And that will do nothing. That will do nothing to California and New York when they sue, and the Supreme Court decides the same thing.
You heard
really
that.
think when the federal government passes a national ban that has no effect across the country? It would. Republicans are trying to pass a national ban. That is what federal electeds need to stand up against on the Democratic side.
All right. All right.
It's unlikely the Senate will even take that up, but the Supreme Court's ruling actually stands against both of those. I think it's dumb legislation for everyone.
Senate right now, and Chuck Schumer wouldn't bring a terrible bill like that to the floor.
All right, ladies, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that since I'm running short of time, but thoroughly appreciate your inputs.